بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وقائدنا وقدوتنا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. Welcome to week 3, and this is the fiqh of Zakat. We will try to cover as much as we can today on this topic, inshallah. And it is possible that, if time permits, we may be able to cover the entirety of the topic actually in the next hour or so that we have together. And if we are, then this will conclude the program and we will not have a session next week. If we are not, then we will come back next week inshallah and conclude the topic of Zakat. So the first thing to understand is Zakat is not something that is specific to the month of Ramadan, and neither is it necessary to give one Zakat in the month of Ramadan. But, many people have this habit of giving their zakat during the month of Ramadan. So usually this topic is discussed, and the questions that we receive are typically around this time of year. So just before the month of Ramadan or leading into the month of Ramadan. So in order to understand something, the very first thing that we have to define is the actual definition of zakat. And mind you, one thing, that this is a very old presentation, but of course the laws of zakat do not change. I have updated the nisab and things like this, but some of the examples may be a little bit, I think somewhere inside here there's an example of somebody investing in BlackBerry, right? You remember BlackBerries, the phones? So today that would be a very bad idea. But back when the presentation was made, that was relevant. So some of these things may strike you as odd, but in general the presentation is sufficient, inshallah. So linguistically, zakat means purity, praise, growth, blessing. And in the Sharia definition of zakat is تمليك بعض مال جزما عينه الشارع لفقير مسلم لله تعالى. Or translated, to give a designated or fixed amount of specified wealth to a needy Muslim for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of these things are requirements. So a specific amount of wealth, which is generally 2.5% of a specific kind of wealth. So there are some types of wealth that zakat is not due on, so a specific kind of wealth. And in general, most of us, we will be giving zakat to a needy Muslim. One cannot give zakat to a needy non-Muslim. The zakat is not permitted to give this. There is one category that we may discuss later on, but for most of us, the recipient needs to be Muslim. There are dozens of places in the Quran and Sunnah where this is mentioned, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. Usually it's mentioned in sequence that you establish the prayer and you give the zakah. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he was giving his farewell advice to Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when Sayyidina Mu'adh radiallahu ta'ala anhu was being sent to Yemen as their teacher, in sequence he was given a number of advice, and the final piece of that advice was فَإِنْهُمْ أَطَاعُوا لِذَلِكَ فَعَلِمْهُمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ افْتَرَضَ عَلَيْهِمْ زَكَاةً فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ تُؤْخَذُ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ وَتُرَدُّ إِلَى فُقَرَائِهِمْ. So in the gist of this is, Allah has made zakat obligatory upon them. And this, what zakat is, the definition of the Prophet ﷺ is that this is wealth that will be taken from the wealthy amongst them, and it will be redistributed to the poor and the needy amongst them. And this is actually the wisdom behind the obligation of zakat, that it's not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created people of different categories. So this is intentional, that Allah has given some people more and some people less. And people's trials in this world, nobody leaves this world without being tested. So some people are tested by being given wealth, and others are tested by not being given wealth. But everybody has an obligation. So even those of us who have wealth, it is our duty to give zakat. So zakat is like the bare minimum obligatory charity. It's not that you should stop here, but this is necessary to give on an annual basis. And this is, this redistributes wealth. So we, in amongst society, so that everybody can share in a relatively stable and comfortable life. So someone who is, truth be told, like let's say for example, somebody a couple of years ago actually did this calculation. So some of the wealthiest people in this world, if they, we're talking with people like Jeff Bezos, what's that guy's name who owns Tesla? Elon Musk, and others, right? So if all of these people were to tomorrow become Muslim and then begin giving zakat for their wealth, we could literally eliminate poverty from the Western world, right? Or even the entirety of the world. So this is a very powerful mechanism that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in place. And it is also a fact that us as a Muslim community, there is a lot of negligence in this obligation. Because this is something that typically, one cannot see. We are all sitting inside the same room. Now, if you don't pray, people can see this, that this guy doesn't pray. Right? This guy, never seen him at the Masjid before. Right? So this guy says he's Muslim, but I've never seen him at Jummah before. He lives like 10 minutes away from the Masjid, never seen him at the Masjid before. So this is something that people can see, that this person doesn't pray. Or if somebody sees you eating during the month of Ramadan, people can see that that this guy, he doesn't fast. If somebody sees that you live a relatively affluent lifestyle, yet you have never gone for Hajj, people can see this. Right? People can see that this is a person who seems to have money, but this person has never gone for Hajj before. But zakat is something that people, they cannot actually see. Right? That, how do I know whether you are paying your zakat properly or not? And how do you know whether I am paying my zakat properly or not? So and the human being loves money. So there's a lot of negligence in this particular obligation. And this is why it's important that we learn the rules and regulations around zakat, and we give it properly. And you will see tremendous barakah in your wealth. And if you give zakat properly, if you discharge this obligation properly, there are uncountable benefits to this. And one of them is actually the preservation of your wealth. There is a story that is narrated, so this is regarding a wealthy Muslim in the era that India and Pakistan and even Bangladesh were under British colonial rule. So there was a fire that had broken out in a particular area, and this destroyed that entire area, and many people's houses and businesses were lost. And I believe Sheikh Zakaria rahmatullah, he actually wrote this story, if I remember correctly, inside his autobiography. So he says that somebody came and announced that the people of such and such an area, everything has burnt down, right? All of the houses, all of the businesses, and there was this this Muslim businessman who was sitting over there, and very contently, very confidently, he said that not mine, right? Maybe everybody else's stuff has burnt down, but not my business. And he was asked that, how can you be so sure about this? You haven't gone to see, you haven't gone and investigated this, and yet you're so confident in immediately saying that your business is fine and it has not burnt down. And he said that I diligently discharge my zakat, and therefore I am confident that Allah will preserve my wealth for me. And when they actually went to see this, that was true. This man's business, amongst all of the others, was preserved. Right? So this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does give barakah in the wealth, and does preserve the wealth. of the person who gives zakat, because this is a dual right. Zakat is, first of all, it is the right of Allah, because Allah has obligated this upon you, and it's also the right of the less fortunate in the community. So if you don't discharge your zakat properly, then you are neglecting the right of Allah, but you are also neglecting the right of your fellow Muslim. And usually we are careful about this, right? So, people, they don't intentionally go around and steal other people's things, right? So, if your phone was on this table, I wouldn't take it and put it in my pocket and leave, right? We don't usually do that, right? Most normal people, at least, they don't usually do that. But when it comes to zakat, in effect, it's the same thing. That if zakat is due on me, and I am not giving it properly, I am not discharging this obligation correctly, then I am literally feeding my family with wealth that belongs to someone else. Somebody else has a right in this wealth. So this is why it's extremely important to understand the rules and to give it. And one of the wisdoms behind zakat is it lessens the love for material wealth in your heart. Because, we are generally a people who love wealth, right? Allah says this inside the Quran, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. That the human being loves wealth. We all love money, right? If you don't like money, then there's something wrong with you. Everybody likes money. Who doesn't like money, right? We all want money. We want more money. The more, the better, right? This is how human beings are created. But this also leads to the love of material wealth inside one's heart, and to lessen this attachment to material things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated this obligation of zakat, and the more money you have, the more zakat that you will give. And therefore, this is one of the wisdoms behind this is that this will decrease the love of that wealth that you have in your heart. So the prerequisites for zakat is, number one, you have to be Muslim. Zakat is obviously not obligatory upon non-Muslims. Number two, you have to be sane. Sane here means that you have to comprehend the obligation of zakat. So if there is a Muslim who is not in the correct state of mind, either at any point in their life, then even if this person has money, zakat is not obligatory upon them, and neither is it obligatory that somebody discharge their zakat on their behalf. It is possible for them to own something, but it's not necessary for them to give zakat, because they can't comprehend the obligation of giving zakat. So it would be unjust to put this obligation on them when they cannot understand what the obligation actually is. Number three is maturity. So there is a difference of opinion here with regards to wealth that children. So maturity over here is not maturity means someone who has reached the age of puberty. Right? So typically between 12 and 15 years old. Right? Or so this is the age that we are talking about. So somebody, let's say who is 9, who has wealth, is zakat obligatory on that wealth? So there is a difference of opinion, and the opinion of the majority is actually that zakat is not obligatory upon the saghir, the person who has who is still a child. And many times our children, they have something, that sometimes someone has given them something. In many cultures, it's a part of the custom and the culture, especially for girls when they are born, that family members, extended family, will give them gold. And depending on the circumstances of the family, this may actually exceed the nisab threshold, and therefore this child would technically be regarded as someone who is wealthy in the eyes of the Sharia, but zakat is not obligatory until they reach the age of puberty. Number 4, possession of, I made this word up by the way, zakatable is not a word, but what it means is, things that zakat is obligatory on. So possession of zakatable assets equal to or in excess of nisab. And I will talk about the nisab in a moment, what that is. Nisab basically means, you can think of it as threshold. So you must meet this threshold in order to trigger the obligation of zakat. And what that threshold is, we will talk about in a moment. And not only must you meet the threshold, but after meeting the threshold, you must complete an entire year, and on the anniversary of you meeting that threshold, if you still own the nisab or excess, then you will give zakat. And this I will explain in detail in a moment. So what is the threshold? So there are two nisabs. One is the gold nisab. So currency in its essence, the paper and plastic that we carry around in our pockets, this is actually not, anything of value. The only currency that has inherent value is gold and silver. And once upon a time, currencies used to, so nowadays, what is currency based off of, right? So this, we should know this, that the world's currencies are a reflection of their value in comparison to what? To the US dollar, okay? And the US dollar, what is its value based on? Well, actually not anymore, right? So if you, Richard Nixon was the one who nixed the gold, the backing of the greenback. So in essence, all of the money that this is, the money that you have in your bank account is tied to the value of your currency in comparison to the greenback. So this is the US dollar, which is tied to nothing. So basically all of our money is worthless. It's only assigned the value that you and we assign to it. The only real value is the value of gold and silver. Okay, so this was the currency in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But because, we assign value to our currency, that, we say that $1 is worth this, and $2 is worth this, and $1 can purchase this, $100 can purchase this. Therefore, we give it its value, but otherwise, we live in a time where inherently our currency is valueless. It's just based on, and this is the whole idea of the crypto movement, right? That they say that the world's currencies are based on a mirage of value, that this is something that governments assign value to currency, and this is why people find them valuable. And the moment that a currency, and this is not unheard of, a currency is devalued, then this is something that, that currency no longer has value. One of the most recent examples of this would be in India, for example. A couple of years ago, there were certain bank notes that were devalued, they were decommissioned, and people literally overnight lost hundreds of thousands of rupees if they did not convert their banknotes in time. This would not happen with gold and silver, because gold and silver has an inherent value. It has an inherent value. So that's why the nisab is always tied to gold and silver. So the values on your screen, these are today's values. I checked this just this afternoon. So the gold nisab is about 87.48 grams of gold. So in today's market value, that's about $7,040. And the silver nisab is about 612.3 grams of silver. So in today's value, that's about $540. Now, you see that there is a huge discrepancy between the gold and silver nisab. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, historically, both of these values would be relatively equal. So 612 grams of silver would relatively be equivalent to about 87 grams of gold. But of course today the value of gold far outweighs the value of silver. So in myself and most scholars, they give the fatwa that zakat is only due on someone who meets the threshold of the gold nisab, not the silver nisab. Because realistically, like somebody who has just $540 to their name, right? This person can't even, pay the rent for that month with this amount of money. So this person, by no stretch of the imagination, is considered wealthy, right? So this is not something that we no longer give the fatwa on the silver nisab. Rather, we use the zakat. Zakat is used. The threshold is used the gold nisab. So basically, what this would mean, this is an example here that this happy individual over here, his name is Hamza. So Hamza, today, let's say the 15th of Sha'ban, which was like 2 days ago, or which was yesterday, sorry, became the owner of $7,040 on the 15th of Sha'ban. Okay? You follow this until here? The next thing that happens is that during the course of so he has met Hamza is Muslim, he has reached the age of puberty, he is sane, 3 conditions met. By becoming the owner of $7,040, he has met the 4th condition, that he has reached the threshold of the nisab. Now there's one condition remaining. What's the last condition? That he has to complete a year in this state, right? So during the course of the next year, Hamza worked a full-time job. I just threw some random income in there. He earned $57,000. That's not really relevant how much he earns during the year, but next year on the 15th of Sha'ban, right? 15th of Sha'ban is now Hamza's zakat anniversary. So every year, this is when he is going to calculate his zakat. And it has to be based on the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar, because this is an Islamic obligation. So it's going to be in the Islamic calendar. So, and by the way, if you don't remember, like when you first became the owner of nisab, you can arbitrarily choose a date. A lot of people, they don't actually remember this. Perhaps they were not as practicing back then in their younger days, so they don't remember the exact day that they became the owner of nisab. That's fine. Choose some date in the Islamic calendar. A lot of people, I advise them that if you don't remember, choose the 1st or the 15th of Ramadan, something like this, so that you remember this date. A lot of times you don't really remember the Islamic date in other times of the year because this is not something that we regularly follow. So therefore, tying it to Ramadan or a date in Ramadan will make it easier for you, because at least you should know which day of Ramadan it is, right? Even if you don't know the other date of the Muslim calendar throughout the year. So the next year on the 15th of Sha'ban, this is Hamza's zakat anniversary, and now we have to see whether he fulfills the 5th and final condition, which is the completion of a year. So he takes inventory of all of his assets, and what assets he needs to look at, we'll talk about in a moment. And he sees that, after subtracting all allowable expenses, what those are, again, we'll talk about in a moment, he is left with $15,000, right? Does $15,000 meet the threshold or exceed of nisab? Yes, it does. So therefore, Hamza will give zakat, right? So on the 15th of Sha'ban, Hamza will give zakat, and zakat is calculated at 2.5% of his total, the total value of his zakatable assets, so not the value. So sometimes this is conflated with what in the West we call someone's net worth, right? When you calculate your net worth, or when the bank calculates your net worth, they also factor in things that zakat is not due on. So like, they will look at the value of your house, the value of your car, the value of any other valuable thing that you own, plus, the investments that you have, the bank accounts that you have. Sometimes they will also look at insurance policies that you hold, and all of this, the sum total of this is how they, in the West, would calculate one's net worth. That's not what we're looking at in terms of zakat. We're looking at a specific selection of assets that zakat is due on, not the value of your home and the value of your car and these sorts of things. What those are, we'll talk about in a moment, inshallah. So these are your zakatable assets. So when calculating zakat, and whether or not you meet the threshold of nisab, these are the things that you need to look at. Number 1 is gold and silver. If you possess gold and silver, then you need to factor this in. Sisters, the gold that you wear. So the gold that are your ornaments, the things that you wear, there is a difference of opinion with regards to whether or not zakat is due on gold and silver that is jewelry, that is something that you actually wear. And the Hanafi school, the zakat is necessary on gold and silver, even if it is for one's own use. This is your jewelry, this is something that you wear. And wear is relative, that it doesn't mean that you have to wear it every day, but it is jewelry that you wear. It is your jewelry. It's not just a gold bar or brick that you have somewhere. It's actually jewelry. Then in the Hanafi school, zakat is you add this as well. According to Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, zakat is not due on gold and silver that is for the purpose of wearing, so that is part of jewelry. So this is a difference of opinion that you should be aware of. Cash, so cash includes the value of cash includes actual cash that that you can wave around, and everybody knows what cash is. Whether it's in your bank, whether it's under your mattress, under your pillow, under your in the glove compartment of your car, wherever it is that you keep cash, right? You need to add that to your zakat calculation. This also includes the value of your investment portfolios, right? Value of investment portfolios, including, and there is some detail in this, the value of RRSPs, and your contribution. If you have children and they have RESPs, then your contribution and any profit earned by way of either dividends or the appreciation of your investments in the RESP. Right? So a lot of people, they don't understand these terms, and so the thing about it is, the more money you have, the more work you have to do when it comes to calculating your zakat. So if you don't know what an RRSP is and an RESP is, and you don't know what business portfolios are, investment portfolios are, and you don't know, you don't understand terms like dividends and appreciation and things like this, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He made your life very simple, right? And when you get more money, then you come back and we will explain these terms to you, inshallah. It's not that I have a lot of money, but I just know this because I have to teach you, right? That's so this cash, right? The cash includes all of that. Business stock, this is if you have a business. So if you have a business, if you buy and sell things, then the inventory that you carry, zakat is due on the value of that inventory. So let's say, for example, I sell books, right? So the value of the books that I have in my store, I need to calculate that and give zakat on that. Let's say, whatever it is that I sell, if I own it as part of my inventory for my business, then I need to calculate zakat on that. The tools that you use to generate income in your business, those you don't need to add the value of that. So there is two different things. One is your business inventory. Think of this as your product, the thing that you deliver to your customer, or the raw material that is required to produce the thing that you deliver to your customer. So let's say you make sofas, for example. So you may have some sofas built and in stock. Those are also part of your business inventory, and also all of the raw material, the leather, the cotton, the springs, and all of the other things that go into making that sofa, whatever you have in your warehouse, all of that is also part of your business stock, and you need to calculate the value of that and give zakat on that. The last two things are generally not applicable to most people, and zakat is calculated differently on these. So this is agricultural produce and animals and livestock. So I'm not going to go into the detail of that because I'm assuming none of you are farmers, and this is not what you are calculating zakat on. Most of us, it's just the first three things that we need to be concerned about. So this is just a list. Gold and silver bullion, need to give zakat on it. Gold and silver jewelry, according to the Hanafi school, you need to give zakat on it. Cash in hand in the bank, coins, all of this you need to give zakat on. Gold-plated jewelry, right? So this is not actually gold. It's made of another alloy. It's just it's plated in gold, right? So this doesn't actually have a value right? It's just something that looks like it's gold, so you don't have to give zakat on that. Jewelry other than gold and silver, this is also an area of difference of opinion. So the standard opinion amongst all of the schools is that only gold and silver is what you have to give zakat on. Other valuable stones, diamonds, things like this are not, you don't need to add that to your zakatable assets. However, many scholars in our contemporary era, myself included, add the value of other valuable jewelry to the zakat calculation. So, for example, diamonds, right? So diamonds it's just a stone. It's because we have assigned value to this, right? We have assigned value to this, and therefore it becomes valuable. You can go and buy diamonds that are in the tens of thousands of dollars, right? So this is something that is extremely valuable, and therefore, again, this is a difference of opinion. Not everybody holds the same opinion, but many scholars in our time, they do hold the opinion that even such jewelry must be added to one's portfolio of zakatable assets. Right? So you just be aware of this difference of opinion. In terms of business, so what qualifies as business stock? So anything, for the purpose of zakat, anything purchased with the intention of resale is considered a commodity. Right? So, for example, let's say that somebody purchases a home. Okay, there's a trend in our time, especially in our market, and this is investing in pre-sale condominiums. Right? So basically the idea here is that when the developer needs the funds, they agree to a purchase price at usually at a reduced price, a discount, and you need to give a deposit on that, and the rest of the sum is due upon completion. But the price is agreed upon, right? So let's say, for example, somebody is building a townhouse complex, and the developer needs money, right? You need money to build this. So the way that they raise capital and they raise money is that they have what they call a pre-sale. So a pre-sale is before the completion of those homes. So let's say they will agree to a price of $500,000, right? So you must pay 20% upfront, so $100,000 upfront, and the remaining 400, either you pay it in cash upon completion, or you can finance it upon completion, right? Now many people, what they would do is they would pay the 100,000, but they have no intention of actually ever going and living there. They know that in the next 5 years, when this complex is completed, this is a business opportunity. So at the time of the completion of that project, they have an estimate that that property will not be worth 500,000, but it's going to be worth 800,000. So they are in this transaction not because they need to go and live inside that home, but because they intend to make $300,000. Right? You following me here until now? It's not getting complicated? Okay. So this person has expressly purchased this for what? For resale. He has no intention whatsoever of living there. So now this person actually needs to give zakat on the value of that property, right? Every year. So on the anniversary, so let's say it's Hamza, so on the 15th of Sha'ban, every year, he needs to go and see that if he were to sell that at that time, so it's not immediately going to jump up to 800,000. Maybe, year one it's going to be worth, 550, 560, then it's going to be worth about 650. Then, eventually upon completion, it's going to reach the target price. But every year what this person needs to do is, because he purchased it with the intention of resale, then he needs to calculate, he needs to add this to the value of his zakatable assets, which is going to be a significant amount of zakat. The only thing that flexibility that we can give him is that if he doesn't have the capital to pay this zakat, because probably he may not, right? He may not have such a large, he may not be so liquid, right, that he can pay this in cash, the zakat. He can defer the payment of the zakat until he does have access to this capital, but he does need to pay. He does need to pay zakat on the value of this. So for what this would translate to is per 100,000 he would be paying $2,500 in zakat. Right? This is if he purchased it with the intention of resale. Anything that you purchase with the intention of resale is considered a commodity. Now, if he didn't do this, if this person, most people, this is how they purchase homes. Unless you are in the business of, doing this, you purchase a home and you have this at the back of your mind that, I'm just going to keep it, and one day if I need to, I may sell it. In some way, everybody has this intention when they buy a home, right? That whether they verbalize this or not, but if I need to, this is a significant value, and I will sell this and use it for whatever I need. Does this person need to pay zakat? No, he doesn't, because the primary intention here is not of investment, right? The primary intention here is not resale. The primary intention here is just that this is something that I have, and if I need to at some point in the future, I will sell it. The same thing with people who own multiple homes. So zakat is not due on the value of all of those homes, unless they were purchased with, what we would call today with the intention to flip the home, right? So, if a person has money and they say that, instead of my money sitting around, real estate historically has been one of the most stable investments that you can possibly have, because at some point in time it's always going to appreciate in value. That's just the nature of real estate. So many people, they would do this, and especially those this is a very common investment in our Desi community. So because we tend to be risk averse, right? So Arabs, the Indo-Pak community, Fijians, all of us, because we come from an immigrant community, right? We come from an immigrant community, and you work hard, right? So, you're going to have a mini heart attack every time if you invest in the stock market and the stock goes up and down. So, generally, our communities, immigrant communities, don't really have the appetite for that, right? They would much prefer something that is like shelf stable, right? So that is something that is risk averse. That you're not going to see like dramatic ups and downs in the course of 24 hours or in the course of a few weeks or months. So if you have done this, then zakat is not due on the value of all of those properties. Right? And this is something that many people, they need to know. Zakat is not due on the value of all of those properties. Zakat, if you do sell it in a particular year and you are holding on to the sale profits, then you will add those profits to that year's zakat calculation, but not the value of the property every year. Is that clear? Does that make sense? What I am explaining in terms of somebody who purchases something with the intention of resale versus somebody who just purchases something to hold it. Okay? Zakat is payable on the retail value of goods for sale. So when you are calculating your business stock, so let's go back to yes. Yes. Yeah. So eventually he will sell it, yes. But the primary intention is actually to secure one's wealth, right? So it's, the primary intention for somebody who holds multiple properties is actually to secure one's wealth. Because of inflation, if you leave, theoretically, if you had, $500 in your bank account 30 years ago, right? Yes, the dollar figure remains the same. It's still $500 today. But the purchasing power of that $500 that's how inflation works, right? Has decreased dramatically. So to avoid that, to hedge against inflation, what people would do is they would park their money somewhere where, in the future it may increase, it may decrease, we can sell it whenever we need to, but at least, this is, they're going to beat inflation, right? That's the idea behind that. So it's not the same as buying it. Everybody is going to, everybody has this intention with anything, right? That, I could sell it. So that's, and a lot of people, their intention is actually never to sell it, right? So they will pass this down from generation to generation. And if somebody at some point sometimes needs to sell it, they will sell it. Otherwise, that's typically how our lands work in Eastern countries. Nobody really sells it. They just pass it down from one generation to the next until somebody needs something, and then they sell that land. So that's... so if you own a business that deals in physical merchandise, then you need to calculate zakat on the retail value of that merchandise, not on the rate that you acquired it, right? So that's important. So if I sell books, then I need to calculate the retail value of those books. Obviously, I'm not going to sell it at the price that I acquired it on. Otherwise, that's not a business, that's a charity, right? So the retail value of those books, what are those going to sell for if you were to sell them today? Real estate purchased for resale is zakatable. Real estate purchased to lease is not zakatable. So if you bought a home with the or any sort of property, an office building or something else, and your primary intention there is that, this is going to be an income generating tool for me, that I'm going to rent it out, and that rent, that is going to be my source of income, then the value of that property is not what we consider when giving zakat. Rather, you will just add whatever. It's not that you will add the total rental income. Whatever you have in your possession on the day that zakat is due upon you, then that is what you will give zakat on. So let's say, hypothetically, you have a basement, right? And this is something that you rent out, and the rent is $2,000 a month, right? So that's $24,000 a year. So it's not the $24,000 that you add to your zakatable assets. It's whatever from that you have in your possession on the day that you must give zakat. So for Hamza, for example, the 15th of Sha'ban, let's say Hamza also has a basement. It rents for $24,000 a year. But usually people don't have access to the entirety of that amount. You use it, you buy something, maybe you went on vacation, and some of it probably goes back into the maintenance of that home. Whatever you used it for, that's not relevant, right? It's whatever is left over from that amount on the day that you are giving zakat, that's what you need to add to your zakatable assets. And when calculating zakat, what you need to do is you need to add the total value of all of your zakatable assets, and then there are certain things that you can deduct from that, which we will get to in a moment, and whatever you have left, that is what you are going to give zakat on, inshallah. So these are, just a list. So deposits, these are zakatable. Insurance premiums. So remember I was saying that the way that you calculate net worth in the West also factors in insurance premiums. So let's say that somebody has, and again, I'm not talking about the permissibility or impermissibility of these transactions. I'm just saying that if somebody has a life insurance policy, for example, right, that's worth, $10 million. So in a Western context, when we look at this man's net worth, we will add that 10 million, that he is worth 10 million plus whatever other assets he has, because he has a life insurance policy that will pay out 10 million upon his death, right? So this is part of his value, but that is not zakatable. Down payments, this is down payments on the home of your residence, right? Not on your investment. So the pre-sale condo example, that's an investment. That's not the home of your residence. But let's say, again, this is not a fatwa on the permissibility or impermissibility of mortgages. This is just in a practical example. That if somebody has made a down payment on a home, then that money is gone. They have spent this, and they don't need to add it to the value of their zakatable assets. The total value of RRSPs and RESPs minus any interest accumulated, right? One thing that I should add over here is when we say the total value of RESPs, so for those of us who are not familiar, like a 1-minute crash course in how an RESP works, is that post-secondary education in this country is very expensive. So this is a government scheme that allows you to contribute a certain, whatever you would like. It is a different account, and this is, it stands for Registered Education Savings Plan. And what this does is that the government incentivizes you to contribute this to this RESP in the name of your child, and the government matches your contribution. Right? The government will match your contribution, and whatever money is inside that RESP, it doesn't usually sit dormant, at least if it's managed effectively, and it's invested in various things at your discretion. You can do it yourself, or you could get somebody else to do it. And that obviously, the idea is that these investments, they will generate a profit, which will go back into the RESP. And the cycle continues, so that hopefully when your child is 18 years old and they are about to enter the post-secondary system, then there will be a chunk of money there to help pay for their tuition and other things. So when I say the total value of RRSPs, that's the total value of your RRSP. That's your contribution, your employer's contribution, plus any dividends received, plus any appreciation of investments. Whatever the value of your RRSP is on the day of your zakat, that is the value that you add to your zakatable assets. The only thing that you can remove from that is if there is interest that has accumulated in either of these accounts. And interest accumulates for one reason or another. Sometimes if money is sitting dormant for a little while, some interest may accumulate there. So this is, if it is managed effectively, the interest component to either of these should be minimal, but sometimes some interest does accumulate in those accounts, right? So the RESPs, you're only adding your contribution plus the value of your investments and those things. You are not adding the government contribution, right? And because the reason you're not adding the government contribution is because the government contribution is contingent upon your child actually going to college or university. So if your child grows up to be 18 and you have diligently, invested in their RESP for the past 18 years, and they wake up and say, I don't want to go to college, right? That's not what I want to do. I want to, I don't know, start a restaurant, right? The government's not going to give money to that person, right? So the whole idea is that they have to enroll in a post-secondary institute in order to get that money, that the matching government contribution. So that is, you don't own that yet. Now, who is going to give zakat on the RESP? This is also an important question, and the answer is the parent, right? Because if you read the fine print of that account, the account belongs to the parent. It is in the name of the child, but it is still your money, right? So let's say, to play this out, if at 18 your child doesn't go to university, who is getting that money that has accumulated in the RESP? So there's no government contribution, but your contribution. Who is getting that? You're getting it, right? You're taking that money back. So therefore, it is still your money. It's not your child's money. A lot of people, they attempt to write off zakat this way. That, that money is not mine, it's my child's, therefore. No, it's not your child's. It's still yours until your child actually goes to school. So, don't try and play games with zakat. Give what is due. Right? This is the right of Allah, and it's also the right of your fellow human being. The only flexibility that can be given here is in the example of the RRSP. If you don't have the liquid capital, right, to actually give this zakat at that time, then you can defer the payment of this zakat to when you do have access to this capital. But I would caution you to not do this for too many years, right? Because the whole idea of an RRSP is that you will withdraw it after you retire, and there are actually penalties for withdrawing it earlier. And the idea is that when you retire, you will be making less money than you are making right now, and therefore you will be in a lower tax bracket. So when you withdraw from your RRSP, it will not add a tax burden to you, or if it does, it will be minimal, right? So, there are people sitting here that know more about tax than me, but that's the idea behind the RRSP, right? So, basically, they incentivize you not to withdraw money from that. But it is still your money, and therefore it's still zakatable. There is a difference of opinion here, that some scholars, they hold the opinion that there is no zakat due on the RRSP until it is actually withdrawn. But in my humble opinion, this stems from a misunderstanding of how that mechanism works, right? So, if you were to take this RRSP, and if you were to go and ask a scholar in another country regarding zakat on this, then the first thing that will come to mind for them is money is bad debt, basically, right? This is comparable to bad debt. Money that you have no access to. It's yours, but you don't have access to it, right? So every scholar will say that if you have money that you don't have access to, then there's no zakat on that, right? But it's not that you don't have access to it. That you can empty out your RRSP tomorrow. You'll be penalized for it, and there'll be tax implications for it, but you do have access to it. You can withdraw that money, right? So therefore, comparing this to money that you don't have access to is not accurate and is not genuine, right? So that is why I sincerely believe that those scholars who, especially if they are not from here, and the majority of the scholars that have given this fatwa do not live in this part of the world, this stems from a misunderstanding of how the mechanism of the RRSP works, right? So therefore, don't go fatwa shopping, don't try and, avoid zakat. If you have enough money to contribute to an RRSP, that means Allah has blessed you, right? That means Allah has blessed you with the ability to pay for your day-to-day expenses and also put something aside for your retirement, right? So if Allah has blessed you with this amount of wealth, then there is no reason that you should play games when it comes to fulfilling your obligation towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we will end here for today, inshallah, and next week we will talk about debt, because debt is a reality of the world that we live in. So it's important that we understand how zakat is calculated on debt, both debt payable and receivable. So I don't want to start that and finish in the middle of that right now. So we will continue from here next week, inshallah. Next week is our final week anyway, so next Wednesday we will talk about the final part, which is debt, and then just how to discharge zakat, who can receive it. That's the last remaining thing. If anybody has any questions about what we talked about until now, I can take them. We have about 15 minutes, inshallah. Yes, the time changes this Sunday. What time will